Sophie, it looks like. Can I ask you to move that?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
That's all right, I'll take it.
No,
It
back
looks
that
like
way.
I'm having a job.
Yeah, tell us. So tell us, why do you want this job?
Are we rolling
Well, I
now?
believe that my interpersonal communication skills would be perfect for this post.
Sophie Aldred, a very warm welcome to Crawley.
Thank you very much. I've been here before, you know.
Have you?
Yes, I
When was
have.
that?
Many times. Well, when I was at university, I had a boyfriend who was from Crawley. And
This is
his
Manchester
mum-
University?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his mum lived in Crawley. And I haven't really sort of been back into Crawley since, but I used to come down and visit her and see him on the holidays and things.
Well, thank you for coming, particularly today. It's St Valentine's Day, leaving your husband in bed suffering from a hangover.
I forgot to give him his card.
Oh dear, black mark.
I know.
Not a good idea.
It's terribly embarrassing, isn't it?
Well, it'll still be Valentine's Day when you get back, so
Oh, yeah, that'd be right. Well, he might have just woken up by then as well, so.
you could say he wasn't in a fit state to give it to him.
That's a good one, right. Any other excuse is gratefully received.
Well, we'd like to sort of give a bit of background to the people here to your life. You were born in Blackheath,
Yeah.
in South London. You were born at home.
Yes, I was.
So was I. So we share something together.
I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Like, there was in the 60s, it was sort of almost like the done thing, I think,
Indeed.
to do that. And then in the 70s, it went very much back into.
It goes in
births
into
and things.
circles.
And now it seems to be that people want home births again.
I know that area quite well. I've got some friends who live in Greenwich, and Greenwich is like spitting distance from Blackheath. Not that I really want to spit there anyway.
Oh no, it's far too.
It's a nice part of London, that,
Yeah,
isn't
it is. I mean, I was very well. I don't believe in luck, but I suppose. I mean, I consider like I had a sort of privileged childhood in that my father worked in advertising and was quite well off and we lived in various houses around Blackheath until I left home really. But yeah, it was a very nice area to be brought up in. I mean, you don't sort of think of it at the time though, do you? You don't sort of realise.
Take it for granted.
Yeah, you do, and like wherever you grow up, you don't really kind of look around and think, oh, this is a really nice place to grow up in. You get on with it, don't you? But I mean, I was aware that London seemed a very long way away. It was really funny. I mean, we used to sort of talk about going up to London.
It's called from an by a train.
I know. And I remember when the first McDonald's opened at the Charing Cross station.
Oh, I remember that. Yes.
And me and my school friends,
in the 70s.
went up there, yeah, and it was very daring. We used to go for a special treat.
Have a Big Mac.
Yeah, a Big Mac. A Big Mac, and what's that? Oh no, it wasn't root beer. It was. They don't.
And the
do
apple
root
pie
beer,
that's
do
like
they?
toothpaste.
Yeah. Yes, and nothing's changed.
When you were younger, you had aspirations to become a writer, I think, at one stage, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
And also, you're very into singing.
Yes.
Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yes.
So what caused you to want to become an actress? Was it a teacher? Was it someone that you knew? What caused that spark of inspiration?
Oh, gosh, I mean, I still think of myself. I bumped into Gerard Murphy last week, who played. He was the guy in Silver Nemesis. Who's a very well-respected actor now. I haven't seen him since then. And he said, "So what are you doing now?" And I just thought to myself, "What am I doing?" And I thought, it's this sort of jack of all trades thing that I have, and I think I still had it when I was a kid. I don't think I ever believed that you had to specialise in one area, that I had to focus on just one thing. So, I mean, I'm still doing a bit of writing, bit of singing, bit of acting, bit of presenting, but the most visible stuff is on TV. So I suppose I didn't ever decide really that I'm going to be an actress. I mean, not consciously anyway. I mean, I'm sure that subconsciously, I did. But so when I got to university, I think I'd been to see a lot of plays, and I did have a very influential English teacher in my sixth form who I'm still very good friends with. And,
That's good to hear.
Yeah, she lives in Vienna now. She's an amazing teacher.
It's a very exotic place to live.
Yeah, well, it's weird how she ended up in Blackheath, because she'd started off where was she at first? She went round Asia and taught in Singapore and so on. Then she came to Blackheath for only like 4 years, and I was lucky enough to be taught by her.
But there's artists and there's actors. It's that kind of it's a very village atmosphere, isn't it?
Yeah.
Blackheath, Greenwich, sort of area, South London.
Yes, although I never really noticed that. I mean, you know, I sort of went. The church choir was a big part of my life. I joined the church choir when I was 11, and that was all my social life really. And you know, especially discovering choir boys, that was a good part of it. And then I ended up going out with the head chorister, Joe Cooper, for about 4 years. I thought I was going to marry him, and you know.
It's a long relationship.
It was at that age, yeah. It was great, and we just, you know, so it was quite a small community, and I wasn't. But the person who sort of influenced me, in addition to my teacher, was Carol Chell. Don't know if you remember her from Play School.
Yeah.
She used to present Play School, and I used to get her muddled up with Liz Sladen because she looked a bit like. And it was about that time that I was watching Doctor Who. So, you know, I used to think, is it the same person or what? You know, doing Play School and Doctor Who. There you go. They are quite similar actually.
Your first acting job as such was in The Night Visitor, playing Little Crippled Boy.
Oh,
I
well,
think.
Marlon, Night Visitors, yeah.
Um,
That's a lovely opera, yeah. It's, I mean, I was in plays when I was little, you know. I think the first play I ever did was when I was about 5, and the of course, the nativity play. And my best friend, Zoe, was sick on my head.
it's quite memorable.
Which didn't seem to put me off, surprisingly enough.
The child accepts it.
No, that was
So-
amazing. Yeah. So anyway, then it was quite a good school for drama and music and stuff. And
This
in fact,
is
I had
a
another-
day school you went to?
Yeah, I went to Blackheath High School. It's called, and I mean, again, a very sort of a privileged school, really. I was very lucky to go there. But I had a wonderful teacher called Miss Kemp when I was, I think I was 7. Was I 7 or 8? 8. It was the year decimalisation happened, and whatever that year that
1971?
was. Yeah, that's it, yeah. And we used to play decimal bingo. And I just learnt pounds, shillings and pence. So it was terribly confusing. In fact, that's why I think I'm so bad at maths, because, you know, I just got my head around pounds, shillings and pence and dividing. Oh, gosh. And then decimals came in, and that was a big relief to all. But anyway, Miss Kemp, along with a friend of hers, who was also a teacher, devised a series of books, which apparently they still use a lot, called Take Part books. And it was books like sort of children's classics like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and which was written by Ian Fleming, did you know?
Indeed,
that?
yeah.
And Hiawatha and things like that. And they were sort of not abridged, but they were turned into plays and play scripts and bound in nice pictures and things. And there were the little stars, asterisks every now and again for sound effects. And we used to read them out. We were her guinea pigs, you know, for these books.
You
We
would
used to
act out
read
the
them
plays.
out loud
Yes.
and act them out. And I thought this was just the best thing. It was fantastic. I starred in them all, you know.
So
it was
was
great.
there a little seed of a germ of an idea to become an actress perhaps from that, maybe?
Well, I think that, and also, I mean, about that time, I also did a lot of plays myself at home, and I bossed around all the children in the local neighbourhood.
This is just William when you used to do all that?
Oh no, that was at
Oh,
school,
that's at
yeah.
school.
But the ones at home, I mean, we've got these photographs of me doing these plays, and I was Prince Charming, and I've still got a little shirt that I used to wear for it. It was a sort of, you know, satin shirt, so I used to put on, and then, you know, I became the part, and I used to wear it for all the roles I played. But I directed, wrote, produced and starred in all the shows, just because I was bossy, I suppose. And my poor younger brother used to play things like the cook and things like that. And we've got photographs, and it amazes me because I was a small child, and there's all these big girls who I obviously like told them what to do. They obviously like just sort of did.
Terrified of you.
Yeah, they probably were. Anyway, we used to put these plays on in our garage at home and send them proceeds. We used to charge 6pence and send the proceeds to Blue Peter. So and so concurrently with this idea of acting and writing, I also, like in my head, had an idea of like, well, I didn't know about being a children's presenter, not like nowadays where it's like most children's ambition is to be a children's TV presenter. But I just thought Blue Peter was the best programme. And
I think when
just
you're a child growing
absolutely
up,
loved
it's
it.
very important. It's something that you look forward to watching.
Oh yeah.
So they're talking to you as equals, not
Yeah.
talking down to you.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
It still is a brilliant programme, whatever Stuart Miles says about it. But I think the thing that really grabbed me was the makes. And I used to adore making things. And I had a book which somebody had given me called 1001 Things to Make and Do, and it was brilliant. And it had everything, you know, even from like circles of cardboard and you put the wool round and then you make fluffy pom-poms, you know, that was
I remember
brilliant.
those, yes,
And
you should wind it round.
yeah,
yes.
remember winding it round?
Yeah.
Or stuff with,
And then cutting them
furniture.
so you make a bull out
That's
of
it,
it.
yeah. And
Yes,
there's that magic bit where you cut round and you think,
Yes.
is it going to work, is it going to work? And it does, and it
Yes.
turns into a pom-pom. Fantastic. Or French knitting as well. Do you remember you used to get those long, like a cotton reel thing with a hole in the middle, that's it. And you used to do that. And I always wanted kits and things for birthday and Christmas presents, raffia and macrame and everything. And I used to go down into we had a garage and I used to have, there was a workbench down there and I used to make things. We've still got sort of these, my mum brought some stuff out of the attic the other day for my niece to play with. And there's this throne, it says on it, Teddy's Throne. And it's about this big and it's like some blocks of wood, and you can see all the wood glue all over it and nails hammered in like this and beads stuck on it. And I remember thinking, what a beautiful thing I have created. A throne for Teddy. And it was so satisfying. It's that thing, do you
Sense
remember
of
from
achievement.
childhood, the thing of making something and having it there and thinking, I did that. Anyway, I was so excited about all this making things and that I used to get up at 5 in the morning and then all of a sudden this book disappeared and I never knew where it went. And it was very mysterious. And years later I was talking to some friends about it and my mum was there and she said, oh right, she said, I'm very sorry about this, but we actually got rid of the book because they couldn't bear that every morning at 5 o'clock they
They
were
threw it
woken
away.
up by bang, 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 you know, sounds of me constructing things, you know. No, they hid it, I think, and I'm hoping that when I eventually go through all the books in my mother's attics that I'll find it, it'll be there.
Moving on a little bit, so you went to Manchester University where you studied drama, read drama. Then you went and did some opera and some cabaret in Newcastle. Now that strikes me as quite a brave thing to do because if anyone's worked those northern clubs, that's quite tough to do that. You have to have a lot of guts. The audiences are very, very tough as well.
Yeah.
That must have been a good training, I should think, becoming an actress because you can stand up and do a cabaret in front of some people who perhaps don't even want to watch you and actually carry it through. That takes guts and also it gives you experience and reaction.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how you wanted to do that.
Well, I didn't, you know, coming from upper middle class Blackheath and going to, you know, posh girls' day school, I didn't know anything about working men's clubs. And one of the best things I ever did was go to Manchester to university because I could have stayed around in London and gone to drama school or whatever. But I actually went and met people from different backgrounds and who'd done a lot of different things with their lives, and that was really good for me to go there. So then when I left, I came back to Blackheath and I saw this advert in the back of the stage, and it was for this. It actually was for doing a pantomime out the back of a van, and I didn't know at the time it was around working men's clubs in Newcastle, but I applied and got it, and it was an equity blacklist company, which means that they were
couldn't
paying
help you get
under
your
the
card
odds.
at all?
No, couldn't help you get your card.
Dear.
But I just thought, I'll do it.
Experience.
Yeah, and what they did, it was a very clever company. It was run by this guy called Jeff Savage, and it's renowned in the business. I was talking to someone last week, and she said, "Not Savage and Stratton." You know, everybody knew about this company, and it was a very clever idea. What he did was he got a script for a panto, and our one was Goldilocks and the Three Bears. He'd employ 10 different groups of people, rehearse exactly the same show, have 10 different vans with exactly the same set, and send us all off with a sort of accommodation list and things, and a list of all the gigs to do these working men's clubs. And of course he would probably charge the working men's clubs a lot of money and give us not very much. So I went off with a group of people up to Newcastle. There's a guy who I'm still very much in touch with, a friend who I spoke to him yesterday actually, who was playing Prince Charming. And there were 5 of us. Oh! Ghost upstairs. There were 5 of us all together, and I was the van driver, and I was meant to. There was another guy who was meant to be driving the van as well, except he just kept. He was this sort of rather cynical, bitter, twisted Australian guy who just kept drinking whiskey and getting drunk. He was playing the baddie. He was a very good baddie, but he could never drive the van. So we got up to this place. We hired this cottage in a place called Corbridge, which is this beautiful place outside Newcastle. Unfortunately, it was a sort of summer holiday cottage on a winter let, so it was very cheap. But the walls were very, very thin, and there was no heating. So I mean, it was absolutely freezing. We were sort of, chipping the ice off the wash basins in the morning. And luckily, my friend Paul is what used to be a fantastic chef, and he used to cook for people in Mayfair and all these. So we used to give him some money every week.
Put on blurred up food and
so it was brilliant. The things he could do with a turkey would surprise you. So that was good. At least we ate quite well. But I mean, I got really ill. He got a chill on his liver. We had one, that we were all. Oh, then the Dane went down with chickenpox. I had to get my boyfriend over at one stage from Manchester, and it really was a pretty horrendous experience. But I saw working men's clubs for the first time, and I mean, I was in my sort of ex-radical student phase at the time, sort of very. I'd found feminism, and I saw this.
Must have been a big eye opener for you.
It was. It was a big eye opener, and I walked into one of the clubs one day, and I went up to order, a pint at the bar, like with my hat and my, student clothes on, and this guy says, "I'm sorry, lassie," he said, "we cannot serve lassies in here," and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, no lassies allowed in this bar, pet." And I was like, and I said, "I think you're a sexist bastard." And he just laughed, and he turned to this friend of his and he said, "Yeah, she just called me a sexy bastard." He just gone through over his head. So I kind of turned on my heel and stormed out. But we didn't have much money, because every week this guy would come up and he had a sort of 70s footballer's perm. He was a very dodgy bloke, lots of gold rings and chains and things. And he'd come up in the van every week, and he'd kind of, give us our envelopes with the cash. It was all very dodgy. And so we ran out of food occasionally, and we were just like really hungry. And I was playing the baddie's assistant, one of my parts, and this baddie. And we had this brilliant idea, because all the kids in the audience were given things to eat. They were like either selection packs or crisps and things like that. And we had this brilliant idea. We realised that if he and I riled the kids enough, then they'd start throwing things. And they did. And so my job became this sort of work the audience up into a frenzy, so they'd throw their food on the stage. So they did. They started throwing their stuff at us. Yeah. And then we had a little pause at the end of each scene with the baddie, where I used to get a big broom and sweep all the stuff into the wings, and then we put it in a box and used to take it out of the van, and we'd go, "Oh, great, Mars bars today." There was one, it was a bit sad, because there was one town which was a sort of ex-mining place where they just had no money at all, a very, very depressed area. This is good old Thatcher days, and there was just like nothing. And the kids, they didn't have anything except oranges. They just like were given an orange when they went in, and we did feel a bit guilty about that. And also the oranges hurt when they threw them. We didn't incite them to riot as much as usual. But it was an amazing time, and it was while I was there I had the idea. I thought, hang on a minute, I'm sure I could work up an act to do in the clubs. And there was another guy there, also called Paul, who wanted to work with me. So we actually worked out an act and singing thing, and then when I'd finished that contract, I went back to Manchester and got this show together, and then I just rang around all the concert secretaries. You know, I looked in the phone book really in Manchester and just thought, I'm sure I can sort of blag my way in here, and so I'd just ring up the concert secretary and say, would you like to book an act for very good, not been seen before, PS Duo, we were called ourselves, and PS because of Paul and Sophie, you see, and we did 60s and songs. We did sort of Everly Brothers numbers, and I had this kind of dress with a big petticoat, and he had a quiff and, you know, a sort of teddy boy outfit, and we got our first show was an audition show, because what they do is they have a big audition show, and all the concert secretaries from the clubs go along, and then they can decide whether to book you or not. And Paul suddenly got this terrible attack of nerves, and he was so nervous, I couldn't believe it. And we did the show, and I loved it. You know, it was great, because I love singing in front of the audience. But he was like a wreck by the end of it, and he just said, "Oh, Sophie, I just can't go through with this. I can't do it." And I was like, "Oh, bloody hell! You know, what now?" And luckily, there was a guy called Paul Ford, who was the year below me at Manchester, and I'd been talking to friends, and they said, "Oh, why don't you ask Paul? He did the clubs a while ago." And I said to Paul, "Do you want to just do this for a laugh, and we'll see if we can get our equity cards out of it?" And he said, "Yeah, why not? You know, okay, let's do it." And it was great that he did, because he's a real comedian as well, and he was great for like the patter in between, and that was really nice. And he and I, well, we ended up doing about 9 months worth of gigs around Manchester, and he's actually done quite well for himself as well.
That must have been a good experience for you, I should think.
Yeah.
You eventually got your equity card. You were, I think, doing a Fiddler on the Roof in Manchester when you had a call for an audition.
Yes.
For the part of Ray in Dental and the Bannerman.
Mm.
Was it Chris Clough arranged this audition, did it?
It was actually, they were cross-casting at the time, I think, for both Dragonfire and Dalton and the Bannermen. And they get this casting thing through once a week, the agents, and it sort of has breakdowns of characters on it. You know, it says genuine American actress wanted for so and so, must be over 6 foot. You know, things like that. And obviously one of these was like actress wanted for 3 episodes of Doctor Who, must look younger than she is and ride a motorbike. So of course that was great, cause, and my agent just thought, "Oh, brilliant!" And she put "has own leathers" on the back of my publicity photo, and I'm convinced that's what Chris enticed Chris to get me to audition.
You didn't actually get that part, but obviously you must have made an impression on both him and John Nathan Turner, because when they came to cast the role of Ace.
Well, as I say, they were cross casting for.
So
both.
You didn't actually come back and do another audition for
No,
that then?
no. What it was they. I mean, when I got to the BBC, they actually had the piece that I had to read was that speech from Dragonfire, the sort of monologue bit, and it was actually, it said Ray rather than Ace on the actual script.
Oh, I see.
So they were just looking for, they also in the back of their minds they thought that Bonnie was going to leave, and so they knew that they were looking for somebody who was potentially going to carry on as the
John Scott Martin was actually in Fiddler on the Roof with you in Manchester when you got the phone call saying you'd been offered the part of Ace.
Yeah, that was amazing, because I'd been down and done the audition, and I'd been back for a recall, and I'd met John Nathan Turner, and didn't think much of it, because you know you do loads of auditions in this business, and sometimes you hear back from people, sometimes you don't. Yeah, and one day I got to the theatre, and my agent had said, "Oh, call me in a couple of weeks, you know, to find out what happens about it." And I'd completely forgotten about it, and I'd been like shopping around town all day or something, and I walked into backstage at the theatre, and there was a note saying, you know, ring your agent at home this evening, and I thought, oh yeah, okay. So went and got ready for the show and did the first scene, and thought, oh, I better ring June, okay. So I went down, and there was a phone booth backstage with a phone in, payphone, and I phoned her, and she said, "I'm just putting my dinner on." and she was really cross. She said, "Where on earth have you been? I've been trying to get in touch with you all day." I said, "Oh, I'm
Nice
really
friendly
sorry."
voice.
I know, she was really cross with me. And she said, "You've got the job, but it's a lot more complicated than that." And she put the phone down, and I just thought, wow. And she rang me back, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's just I've been very frustrated because I've been wanting to talk to you for all day." She said they're going to give you the part, and there's the possibility that you're going to take over as the Doctor Who assistant.
Wow.
And I was just like, what? You know, here's me, back row of the chorus in this musical, never having been into a TV studio before or in front of a camera. I mean, because there weren't video cameras really then, were there? I know.
Indeed,
in 87.
indeed, yes.
Gosh, things have happened so quickly, haven't they? I mean, this all would be, 10, 11 years ago.
Isn't there a funny story about Dragonfire where you actually didn't know where the TV studio
Oh
was?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was in rehearsals at North Acton at the BBC rehearsal studio.
And Christoph had to tell you in front of Bonnie
And,
Langford where it was.
Yeah, yes, I sort of went up and said, "Oh, where's the studio?" Yes, and I thought, gosh, Bonnie knows, she's been travelling there for all her life, and I don't know where it is.
I'm curious about Dragonfire because there's overtones there, Wizard of Oz. Your character is actually Dorothy's the correct name. You conjure up this storm in your bedroom and go to Iceworld. I mean, you can interpret that if you want, and it's obviously there underlying the character.
Yes, when for a good luck card for the first day's studio, Ian Briggs actually sent me a card with Judy Garland as Dorothy.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the outfit that you chose for Ace. Or was it actually given to you to wear? Did you have an input into the costume you wore?
Well, what happened was I turned up to the read-through and I was wearing, it was summer, I was wearing a pair of army shorts, sort of big baggy army shorts, a pair of Doc Martin shoes, and a stripy t-shirt, and I suppose for the time I was looking sort of vaguely, sort of studenty, trendy type. And unlike Bonnie, who was sort of, actressy, very expensive clothes, and I just looked a bit of a scruff, really. Anyway, Andrew Cartmel came up to me afterwards, the script editor, and he said, "I really like your clothes." He said, "Are they yours?" I thought, strange thing to say. No, I borrowed them off somebody on the way here, actually. Anyway, he said, "I think that would be a really sort of good look for Ace." And so we called the costume designer over and we discussed it. And I'd actually, in the back of my mind, already sort of thought of some ideas for Ace. I'd looked in the Face magazine and I'd seen girls wearing those black bomber jackets with safety pins all over and stripy tights and cycling shorts. And in a club in Manchester when I'd been doing Fiddler on the Roof, I'd actually seen a bloke wearing one of these jackets with a Blue Peter badge on as well, so that's where that idea
I was going to ask you about that, because Ace is a very sort of rebellious figure. She's very anti-authority, and she has 2 Blue Peter badges.
Yeah.
How did she get those? Did she steal them? I mean,
No. I think Ace is obviously like going through her teenage rebellion at the time that we see her. But I think before that, she's obviously like things like Blue Peter.
I wondered if it was something conscious that you want to become a presenter, Blue Peter presenter, whatever. It was like a little kind of in-joke or something.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was definitely. But I'd seen this badge and I thought, oh, that looks really cool, and I'd rooted my own ones out. And funny enough, when we got into the studio for the first day's recording, they actually had to ring up the Blue Peter office and check, because there's a thing called a ring main at Television Centre where anyone can tune in to what's happening in any of the studios. And the Blue Peter office had been saying, oh, let's find out what's happening on Doctor Who, and they'd seen me with my Blue Peter badges, and they'd rung John Nathan Turner and said, "What's she doing with Blue Peter badges on? Where's she got them from?" And the production secretary actually came down to me on the studio floor and she said, "I know this sounds like a weird question," she said, "but where did you get your Blue Peter badges?" And I said, "Oh, I got them in about 1970 something. I wrote off some ideas to Blue Peter." And she went back and they checked and they checked that I had. And they said, yeah, okay, she's allowed to wear them because they are hers. She won them legitimately. But they're very good about, policing the giving out the Blue Peter badges in the Blue Peter office.
I'm not going to go through every single story you've done, but I want to concentrate on, say, 3 titles. But Andrew Cartmel was very important, I think, to the development of your character.
Definitely.
And there is a development. Most companions have a very sort of strong featured opening story or two. Then they become the boy, the girl, assistant. Your character has a definite arc where it actually Ace becomes more experienced. She learns more about herself. It's definitely a story of development there with regard to that character. How important was he? Did he sit down and talk to you about this, or?
I think Andrew is very important in that development. I mean, I think that he realised that there was a good relationship anyway between Sylvester and me as actors, and sort of saw how he could use that in the sort of development of the character, and also that the stories could actually spin off from the characters rather than a lot of the time. I think in these sort of maybe some of the older stories, the story would happen despite the characters of the Doctor and Ace. So I never actually, I mean, I didn't sit down with him and sort of discuss, right, you know, what should we do with the character. Really left it up to them. But I remember between Dragonfire and the next season, I did get invited out to lunch with Andrew, Ben Aronovich, Mark Platt,
The writers then?
with the writers for the following season. I think so that they could just sort of find out how I was as a person and see what I'd be interested in doing.
What surprises me though is you get this development of the character. There's the stories are filmed out as sequence into the order they're actually transmitted, and yet that development is still there. It's very clever, whether by design or luck or whatever. It is definitely there. We had Jean Marsh at Crawley in November. She worked with you on Battlefield, obviously. I love that story, the Arthian type of story. Nick Courtney, of course, on it as well. Working with people of that calibre must have been eye-opening for you.
Oh, that was extraordinary, yeah. I mean, to walk into a room full of people who, you know, you've watched on telly all your life, and, you know, like her with Upstairs, Downstairs, and I mean, that was fantastic. And a bit sort of slightly, for the first, you know, the read-through, I'd be thinking, am I ever going to summon up the courage to talk to this person? And then, you know, immediately you just find out that, well, as you probably have with everybody, they're just normal people, and, you know, they're just really lovely to work with. And also, all doing Doctor Who because they really wanted to. No money in it, but they always had really fancied playing a baddie, like Sheila Hancock, you know.
Indeed.
Fancied playing a baddie, and I mean, Dinsdale Landon with his hump, you know. I mean, he got that hump put in, especially for Curse of Fenric, because he thought, can I have a hump? You know, thought that would really add to the character, and then I'll just get rid of it when I turn into Fenric, you know. That really
Fenric was actually made before Ghostlight, but shown after, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Well, that has almost like a...
Oh no, hang on. You see,
so.
I can't think of them in transmission order because, of course, I just
order you made them.
but I can only think of them in the order that we made them.
Fenric is quite an adult story. I mean, it's almost like a Hammer type. It's got this horror element to it, and it's certainly for the time it's transmitted to the early evening, it would have been quite strong material. I know you like that story very much, and there's some very clever bits and pieces in that where you aren't too sure about the Doctor's motives. I mean, he seems to be a little bit going one way and then the other, but it's a story that really holds up to repeated viewings, I think, as well.
Yeah,
quite complicated in a way.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about it is the design, which I think is luck in a way, because some of it was planned to be filmed in studio, and I don't know about you, but I always feel that the best stuff worked on location.
Definitely.
You know, because it's just the more reality, you know. And it had been planned for studio, and then it was like, oh no, we'll do it all on location. And I think that's one of the things that makes it work. You know, all that dry ice and the sea. You know, actually using the sea, and so I think
it looked quite big budget, didn't it? I mean,
yeah,
I know
it
was
did.
TV,
I mean,
but it looked like
I mean,
money
it
spent on
looked,
it.
absolutely. I mean, it was brilliant. The way they used the budget on that was extraordinary, and the Hemivores as well. I think look like they don't look like, you know, typical Doctor Who.
No, they don't.
You know, I think they've got the character. I mean, it's very clever because of budget, they're clothed. You know, they are like people, but they've just got these sort of crusty bits all over them. And I think that, you know, all those things with the long nails and the vampire element. I mean, that was brilliant as well. really good.
I like Fenric very much, but I think my personal favourite of the stories you did was Ghostlight. I think that was a superb story. We learned so much about Ace's character, and like they're talking about future stories and things with her, and she sees this painting and everything. And it's just a very, very strong, beautiful dresses, of course, that you're wearing as well. And lovely production design was superb on that.
Yes, it was. I mean, that again looks so expensive, and it wasn't. You know, it was dead cheap, but it was just the brilliant way that the designer had managed to get all these props together and fill it with that very heavy Victorian feel. And also, because it was all set in an interior, that was entirely suitable, that it was all on location. You know, it was really, that worked fantastically, because that claustrophobic atmosphere really lent itself very well to sort of Victorian heaviness, I think. And the actors, I mean, the calibre, you know, Sylvia Sims, for goodness sake. I mean, that was just amazing to have those people involved.
I'm curious about some of the stories that came out on video with extra footage. Fenric had extra footage, Battlefield did, I think Silver Nemesis did as well. I mean, at the time, did they have enough material to edit it down into the 3 or 4 parts that they were doing? Had some left over, or do you think they actually had the extra footage and it made the story more available when it came out on video? Because they work both ways. They work as the original transmissions, but actually better with the extra footage, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just a real
it helped
great
to make
shame.
them much fuller stories.
Yeah, because always they were overwritten. I mean, we were
Why was
cutting
that,
great
though?
chunks.
Because you had good writers on it. I mean,
I think it was just one of those things where people always, you can never tell how long something's going to take. I mean, I've just done this thing, sequel to Mind Game Trilogy, and
Terence Dix has written that, hasn't he?
no,
Has
he
he
hasn't. No, he's written.
He wrote the original?
Yeah, he wrote the original. No, a guy called Roger Stevens has wrote mine. Miles Richardson, who actually plays the Draconian, has written his own one, and I can't remember who wrote the Centauran one. Maybe Terence wrote that one. But anyway, the one I've got, I mean, we suffered from the last one for not having enough material because there wasn't time to shoot it. But this time, I mean, my monologue, it's meant to last 15 minutes. But of course, when you just read something through, even if you're in a rehearsal room and you do a read-through, you cannot get an accurate picture of it at all. You can't get an accurate timing because you don't know about, you know, how long each shot is going to take to develop. You know, sometimes there'll be a little tracking shot that really adds to it, you know, but it takes up like 10 seconds, whereas the writer thought it would take up 2 seconds, you know. So it's a really amazing. I mean, we could tell by the end, Sylvester and I would get the scripts through the post and we could actually go, ooh, 20 minutes too long, you know. And it was just unbelievable. We'd be cutting stuff in rehearsals, pages and pages of things, and then we get on location and shoot it. And of course things always take longer, so they ended up with loads of extra. There was enough material almost from Curse of Fenric to make another episode. I mean, they just put the bits in the extended version. But I mean, I think even John Nathan Turner said there was talk at one point of having a whole other episode of Curse of Fenric, because there was just
I wonder why
so
they didn't
much
do that.
material.
It wouldn't have mattered to make it a 5-part or 4-part. I mean,
you know, BBC scheduling and stuff. I mean, it's, you know, you can't.
You can only
these
fit
things
into
are-
there, like it fitting exactly,
Yeah,
don't they?
yeah,
so
exactly.
what you say, there might be perhaps a chance for extra longer versions of some of the short stories that have been released on video.
They probably wiped the tapes though.
Yeah.
Probably recorded the news over it. Actually, could somebody just pop out and get me my water? It's on the stairs.
Very
That's all
sorry.
right. No.
You should have had it here. I apologise
That's
for that.
okay. It's just, it's a
Okay,
bucket.
class.
Yes.
Sorry about the
It's
water.
alright.
It must have been sad when the show finished, really, because it was just starting to get the ratings back again. Against Coronation Street, which is probably stupid scheduling really on BBC's part. I mean, you don't put it up against a huge show like that. But it must have been really annoying because you're just getting into stride with your character. You might have done another year, say, with Ace, and then left to do other things. And it stopped, you know, as it's getting good kind of thing. The last season probably was the strongest season, I think, of Sylvester's tenure as the Doctor. You must have been so frustrated.
I think it's one of those things though that you just learn to accept very quickly in this business. You sort of just
The water's on its way.
marvellous. Thank you. I mean, I learnt very early on that you can't sort of rely on anything. I did a kids show, and there was a 6-month contract with a possibility of an extension for another 6 months to a year's contract, and I just assumed because it was a really nice company and I enjoyed working for them that I'd get the following 6 months. And the first 6 months came up and we all went in and had a little interview and they said thank you very much, and some people were asked to stay, and I walked in and they said, oh, thank you very much, yeah, bye. It was like, it was such a shock. And in fact I ended up staying on because they had a misunderstanding and they thought that, I don't know. But anyway, my other company members persuaded me that it would be a very good idea if they... Yeah,
cheers.
Good.
Gin.
Anyway, but so you do learn to that's... I mean, at very first when Sylvester actually told me the news, it was him.
He actually
who
broke the
told
news
me,
to you then, not John Nathan Turner.
Well, actually what happened was I was rehearsing for Corners, one of the children's programmes I did, and he rang me at the rehearsal rooms and I thought, it's a bit weird, and this is probably in about September, October of '89, and he said, are you sitting down? I said, well, I am now. He said, my agent just went out for dinner with somebody from the BBC and they said sorry to hear about Doctor Who, and my agent said, what? Well, the cancellation of Doctor Who, and so neither of us heard through BBC channels. We both heard through kind of gossip, which we both felt a bit pissed off about, and anyway, didn't hear a reason. I was pretty pissed off. I mean, really, because
I can
just
see that.
because you sort of line up something for the following year. But I mean, I was lucky enough that I had 4 months left on Corners to go, so I knew by the end of it, I'd have managed to find myself another job. But I think it was just such a shock, really. I think it was probably more of a shock.
Well, they did it in a very low key way,
yeah,
didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They just
Also,
very
quietly
low.
faded
Yeah,
out.
very low.
I think because of what happened to Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant when they were doing this 18-month hiatus, there was almost a feeling that might happen again, that perhaps in 1990 won't come back, and certainly for 2 or 3 years. And interviews you gave at the time, this bears this out. You think you're going to be invited back at some stage?
I don't know. I mean, I never thought I would be. I mean, because I didn't really know anything about Colin and Nicola and the hiatus or anything like that, so I just assumed that...
This is Michael Grade, who just didn't
that
like
was
the
the end
series,
of
he
the
hated the series. So.
Yeah. But I didn't know anything about that at the time, and I just thought, oh well, never mind, get something else. That's what you do. I mean, there's been a couple of things like that in my career, and you just have to sort of just go, oh well, never mind, carry on.
Now, talking of Colin and Nicola, you actually worked with them on More Than Messiah.
Yeah.
This was a sequel to Summoned by Shadows, when he's playing the stranger that might or might not be the Doctor or someone like him, Miss Brown, who could be his companion. It's very clever the way it was done. And your character's a rather strange character in that, isn't it? It's surreal sort of character.
Yes, it was funny. I mean, I really enjoyed working with Bill. I thought he was an excellent director and very underrated. It's a real shame that he hasn't been kind of taken up more seriously by the BBC as a director. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed working with Colin and Nicola as well. I mean, it's one of the lovely things about doing conventions and things is meeting the other people from the show and meeting people who you get. I mean, we all get on really well. It is like a family, I really enjoyed it. Except it was very cold in those caves, but I enjoyed working on it.
You've also done a lot of presenting, haven't you, as well? You've done Corners. You've done a lot of kids presenting, really. I'm curious about this because for an actress, there's obviously a technique that you use, TV cameras or whatever, on stage, perhaps slightly different. With presenting, is that the same, or is it different, or do you have to... You're being yourself, aren't you? So
yeah, I think presenting is something that you either can do or you can't do, and I'm lucky enough to be able to do it. And I think you have to not be afraid of just showing yourself. A lot of people, I mean, even a lot of presenters, I think, put on an act of being
like
a
John
presenter.
Adams, for example.
Yeah.
which
Oh yeah. I
became
mean, yeah.
his
But I mean,
person.
I think some people. I mean, that's all right because I think there must have been, sort of, a bit of him that was like that. But I think I don't know. I think some presenters you kind of get irritated with, and when you think, oh, why am I irritated with them? It's probably because they're coming across as being a bit false or a bit. So I suppose it's the acting helps in that you know how to play the part of being somebody who's themselves, you know. But
there's a few actors that have done it. The Peter Purves, obviously, with Blue Peter, Jenny Hanley with Magpie, and they were very good presenters, and they had an acting background. I think if you're presenting, to have an acting background probably does help. Would you say?
I don't think it matters anymore.
Really?
I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, you see in those days, and even when I got the presenting jobs, there was the way in was possibly through acting, you know, because people didn't just go up and say, I want to be a presenter. Now, I mean, in the last 10 years, television has changed beyond all recognition, and now, you know, children grow up with the ambition of wanting to be a television presenter, which we never really had before. And it's a lot, I mean, I've just been working with some kids from doing a thing for Trouble TV, the cable channel thing, and they're all sort of 16 to 20-year-olds, and they all want to be presenters, you know, they all want to get on telly, and they see it as a quick route to sort of fame and fortune. And you don't realise that the people who've actually got there, the people who are actually, you know, like your Zoe Balls and it takes a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of kind of playing the game, really. And the way in now, I mean, is through sort of work experience, being chosen to do things. It's a very, very different route to when I was going into it. So I don't think it's necessarily an advantage or a disadvantage. I think the people who are presenters or who want to be presenters are more likely to be interested in the whole sort of acting entertainment world anyway. So.
You mentioned Mind Games, you did on the Sequel 2 trilogy. You also were in Shakedown, the Centenary story, which Terence Dix, I think, wrote as well, actually. That was a very good production. And it looked
amazing.
Quite glossy.
I mean, it was really bizarre to work on it, because, I mean, we just sat there thinking, this is just going to be appalling.
But it worked though, didn't it?
It does. I mean, it really worked.
It works on
amazing.
camera.
Yeah, it does work on camera. I mean, that was another great thing. I mean, the setting was brilliant. HMS Belfast was a brilliant setting because, again, very claustrophobic, very good atmosphere, good lighting, and good camera work saved that production, I think. I mean, I was amazed when I saw it on the screen for the first time.
Were you a bit worried then it might not come out?
Yeah, we were all sitting there thinking this is going to be the biggest pile of rubbish. But no, it worked really, really well. We were all very pleased with it. Also,
you've done these audio ventures with Sylvester. They're very good, I think, because it's very difficult when you're doing something for like radio or audio only. And you have to give, I think performance-wise, it must have been more difficult in some respects, perhaps.
I don't know. I never think about my performance at all. I just kind of do it. I think I'm very lucky. It seems to just come naturally.
Was it difficult going back to the character of Ace after that break?
No, not at all. Really bizarre.
Because getting like the voice right, or I mean, obviously you've done other things since then, and you can just go into Ace mode then, can you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just working with Sylvester as well is great because that makes it easy, because that whole relationship, you know, it's just the same as it ever was. And no, I don't know. I don't really think about it, or you know, it's very strange, isn't it?
We'll open this up to questions from the audience a bit later on. But I'd like to talk to you about the TV movie that Paul McGann made with Sylvester. I think it was nice that he was in that to hand over the mantle. It would be unforgivable without him being in it. But why weren't you in it? Were you ever offered a part in that, or?
No, I mean it was. I mean, I thought Sylvester was the best thing in it. I thought it was great.
It's one of the best pieces of acting I think he's ever done. I think it's superb. So that opening sequence is really the best thing about
touching.
it. But apart from him and Paul McGann, it doesn't really. It's not Doctor Who enough for me, I don't think.
Well, you got to remember that really they were making it for the American public. They weren't. I mean, there was absolutely no consideration of British, you know, fandom at all.
But they should have taken into consideration that the American audience had liked the Tom Baker style of Doctor Who.
But you're talking about a very small minority of the American public who even know about.
Yeah,
Doctor
but
Who.
you should have given it a different edge, in my opinion. The edge was wrong.
Well, it's just that, I mean, they had to
Even for the American audience.
They were coming to it as a completely new thing. I mean, for us, it was almost like the first time we saw, I don't know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You know, it's you don't, well, you do know what to expect from the title, really, don't you? But you know what I mean. There's something that can be very well known in the States, and we know nothing about it at all. And then suddenly it comes on, and we go. Now, for them, it was like, I mean, America's a lot bigger than Britain for a start. So the percentage of people in America, although a lot of people watch it, on PBS. I mean, I don't know if those of you who've been to America. Public broadcasting and Doctor Who is a tiny, tiny, tiny part of the broadcast output. And I would say that probably 95% of the American population had never heard of Doctor Who before. And the ones who had, who weren't particularly fans, would have gone, oh yeah, the guy with the long scarf. So they were having to present to the American public something completely new. And the Americans, God bless them. I mean, a lot of Americans can't understand English accents. I've been over there, and people have gone, have been going, pardon me, what? Yeah, but they just, a lot of them. So to have like British actors in it was very daring anyway. I mean, be thankful that they didn't just cast it completely with Americans.
But there was never any chance, any time that you'd be considered to become back.
I was very surprised because I met Philip Siegel at a convention in LA, and I thought I was, I sort of was all prepared to say, "Oh hi, I'm Sophie Aldred. I was in the TV version in Britain," and he came up to me and he said, "Sophie," he said, "Hi, really nice to meet you," and he said, "I did fight for you to try and to be in the series," he said, "but it was just impossible." He said that the having to explain a 30-year history of a British cult science fiction program is more difficult enough. Difficult enough.
It needn't have been a big part. You have just like a cameo to sort of hand over the mantle. So I think it's really sad in some ways you weren't given the chance to sort of have a finishing end to your character.
Yeah, I just think it was, I mean, Sylvester was nearly not in it. I mean, he
well, they cut him back, didn't they?
Yeah, well, first of all, what happened was he was approached to appear in it, and then he said, and then his agent said, "We'll send the script and we'll have a look." And they sent the script, and he was like just a cursory mention, and so he said, "Well, no, it's not worth doing. It's the part's not big enough," and so they rewrote it to be a much bigger part, and so he accepted, and then they actually filmed it, but then unfortunately some of it was deemed to be not suitable for viewing.
There's lovely things in that, like you've got Sylvester reading Against Your Will the Time Machine and stuff which is just superb.
A lot of these things were his ideas, in the series. I mean, like there's a scene in Dragonfire where he's reading Doctor at Large or something, Doctor at Sea, and he was always thinking of gags like that to put in. So I mean that's one of the wonderful things about working with him, is that he's constantly inventive. I mean, even in the audio dramas, we're always thinking of little bits to put in here and there.
You made quite a few of those. Are there any more in the pipeline?
Yeah, there are. We've just recorded 2, in fact, one last week and one the week before, so they should be out.
That's good to hear.
Reasonably soon. Yeah, I mean, I'm really delighted with the way it's gone, because I think that they're very good quality, and it gives the writers a chance to develop. It gives us a chance to, and we're working with some really good people. The one we did 10 days ago, we've got the guy who used to be Pete Beale in EastEnders, and another guy from EastEnders, a woman who was in Brookside for a while. All these actors are being attracted to do the audios now. It's almost like the series was,
That's good to hear. We're going to open this up to the audience now. Sure. People, I'm sure, have a sip of water while you're... So, has anybody here got a question for Sophie?
Yes.
What was your involvement in Dark Dimensions?
Oh yeah, that was a weird one, wasn't it? I was sent a script and asked if I'd be interested in appearing in it. And I thought, oh, fantastic, that's really good. And then I read the script, and it was all very exciting, I thought, wow, brilliant, somebody's going to do Doctor Who again. And I read the script and I thought to myself, this is very bizarre. This is a script. It looks like it's been written by a fan, you know, not wishing to be putting fans down at all, because I think, you know, a lot of people do a lot of very good writing. I was thinking there are a lot of jokes, there are a lot of references here that the public isn't going to get. You know, that I just felt that it was a really odd script. I mean, it was a nice part for me, and you know, it was fine. It was written well. But I just thought it was a very strange script, and it did remind me of a lot of fan stuff that I'd read. So I wasn't at all surprised to find out that it was a sort of a hoax that had gone a bit too far. It was almost like one of those things that you know, the Capital Radio, who got through to Tony Blair's office, you know, by pretending to be William Hague, and had no idea that they would get that far, you know, to actually speak to Tony Blair was that easy. It was almost like this fan had gone round, you know, saying to people, we're going to do Doctor Who again, here's the new script, and they'd gone, oh yeah, okay, right. And he was like, they actually believe me. What do I do now? You know, so, get some actors booked. Okay, I'll do that then, you know. So it was almost like it had gone, the ripples had spread, you know, and it sort of got out of control before anybody actually realised that, you know, it was a fan who'd actually instigated the whole thing, not the BBC.
Any other questions for Sophie?
What happened to WOW? That was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was going back to the old
good.
Tiswas days of Saturday morning TV. And now they've got this really awful Saturday morning programme I don't even bother watching, but WOW was really good and I really enjoyed it. What happened to it?
Well, it was a political thing. What it was WOW was made by a production company in Maidstone called Media Merchants, which is basically Neil Buchanan, who does Art Attack, and his business partner. And I'd done It's a Mystery for them, which I'd really enjoyed. And Neil and I, we've always got on well, and we just got on so well. We had such a laugh doing this series. And halfway through my contract with It's a Mystery, Tim and Neil asked me if I'd be interested in doing this Saturday morning show. I said, yeah, of course, that'd be great. And so, I mean, I did a sort of cursory screen test for it, and you know, they said, yeah, brilliant. But because they're a tiny company, really small company, and they'd been very successful. You know, there's Art Attack, which is a huge success for them. They also produce and direct Zap, which is very popular, sort of very creative children's programme. Then they'd got It's a Mystery, and now this Saturday morning. And Central TV, who made, do you remember Scratchy & Co?
I do.
Well, Central TV makes Scratchy & Co. Now, Central are a huge company. I mean, they are mega. And they were incredibly pissed off that this tiny little production company had got the Saturday morning show, which is quite a prestigious slot to get. They wanted Scratchy and Co back on. And basically, they were in charge of putting out all the trails for Saturday mornings. So guess what? We never got advertised anywhere. The kids never knew, you know, never knew we were on.
This is really unfair.
And of course, I mean, Live and Kicking is a force to be reckoned with. You know, it's a phenomenon, and that's fine. I mean, the BBC Saturday morning show will always be more successful than the ITV one, just because it's brilliant. You know, I mean, it's like Blue Peter. It's a long-standing formula. They've got a massive budget. You know, I mean, they say they haven't, but I mean, their budget compared to ours is like we just. Because I know Trevor and Simon very well. They were at university with me, and I mean, it's amazing talking to them what they could and couldn't do. We were like on an absolute shoestring, but it was very interesting to do, because meeting all those pop stars was really good fun. I mean, it was quite amusing though, because I mean, I was 34, and I mean, all these pop stars are like sort of between 18 and 31. And, you know, 10 years before I would have probably been really impressed and been sort of asking for their autographs and things. But then, you know, when you get like Peter Andre coming along, and I was sort of going, we look something nice, boy. It was so funny. 911 came on, and these 3 boys, you know, and men, should I say, and they came into the studio and they said, "Hey, we know you. You know, you used to be on Doctor Who. Hey, you're really lovely. We like you." And they were they all started chatting me up, and it was so funny. I thought to myself, "Oh, I could take you home and give you a nice cup of tea and some cake." And then there was one guy called Kavanagh who was sort of out of the Take That stable from Manchester. Really nice guy. And in the rehearsal on the Friday, I walked across to our sort of mobile phone area where I was going to interview him. And I walked across and jokingly I said, "So I'm sitting here and I'm interviewing the person whose mother I'm old enough to be." And then I suddenly went, "I am old enough to be that." And because I'd read the notes, you know, and his age, and I thought it was really weird. I think my best moment on that though has got to be doing Blind Date with the Spice Girls. That was fantastic, and I was Cilla Black, and they'd literally because I was doing so many other jobs that year as well, I sometimes I couldn't even make the rehearsal, so I'd have to just turn up on the Saturday morning terrified with an hour and a half of live telly to do, with people just saying, "Right, go there, do this, do that," and having an earpiece in, being told what to do, just "Right, cut to camera 2. No, not that one. It's camera 2." Anyway, so they told me, I think it was the day before, they'd said, somebody had rung me up, the producer rung me up and said, "Can you do an impression of Cilla Black?" And I said, "Well,
Laura.
yeah." And so I did, and then I got down there and I said, "Well, what am I going to wear? What does she wear?" They said, "Oh, we got you this wig," and to put the wig on, and I made these teeth out of a polystyrene cup and put them in, and it worked.
She loved
really.
you, didn't she?
It worked really, really well. Oh, and in fact, I was really chuffed because Vince, my husband, was working on Sky Sports at the same time, also doing a Saturday morning live show. It's really funny, and he was doing this show called Soccer AM on Sky, which was quite a sort of cult show. And one day he rang me, and I'd just finished, and he said, "Guess who's in the gallery?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Chris Evans." And this show that he was doing turned out to be Chris's favourite programme. So he sort of used to take them out and on the town. And my proudest moment was that Chris had seen me doing Cilla Black, and he really liked it. But it was very funny.
We have a question from the gentleman over here. Want to ask a question?
Yeah, but it was scary. That tank thing.
Oh yeah.
And it sort of cracked.
Mm.
And Sylvester said, haven't been. He said had to. So quickly get her out.
It's when you almost drowned, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's right. Yeah, that was scary. It was weird though, because it wasn't scary at the time, because it just happened and it wasn't really.
Afterwards, you realised what might have happened,
yeah.
and then you realised then you're really scared.
Yeah, but at the time it was just so bizarre, because I was just steadying myself on the front of the tank, and there was this massive crack, and as you say, Sylvester's quick reactions. I mean, if you've seen the tape of the actual footage, I mean, his reactions are so quick. And luckily, I put my arms in the air. I couldn't hear him or I couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
I could just hear this sort of rushing water and splintering glass.
This crack, and he said that I've never been a hero, but that moment, it was a hero.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Any other questions for Sophie? Tom?
What was Clive James like?
Oh, right. That was really
about this.
fun.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because Annika and Nikki were really pissed off because they were like, I think, bless her, Annika, she hasn't done much telly, for a long time, and I don't know, I don't really know that she knows how the television game works, I think, I'm afraid I'm
miles away from other things she's done, so she's been right out of it.
And I think, I think she was sort of expecting great things, whereas I had expected to, exactly for what it was, go along and have a laugh. And, and I thought it was a really good laugh, and it was nice to meet up with all those people again. And obviously, if you're invited to go on with Clive James, you're going to expect to have the piss taken out of it, the programme and things like that, which I think is great. I thought the clips were very well chosen, but he's a huge science fiction fan. He's a very loving piss take. But the funny thing was that he was absolutely panting after Jackie Pierce. He had his tongue hanging out, and it was amazing. I mean, afterwards, you know, he wasn't interested in anybody else at all. And I don't know, have you met Jackie?
Yes.
Yeah, she's amazing. I mean, such a wonderful woman, and we get on very well. And she's got that wonderful that laugh, hasn't she? And she said to me, he came into the room when we were drinking, having hospitality, you know, and he just made a beeline for her and just sort of talked to her for a while. And then I sort of went over because I could see her getting like pinned against the bar, you know. And I said, you're okay, okay. She said, oh, darling. She said, he's invited me out to lunch. Like this. And it was just really funny. And then he went off. But he's an amazing guy. I mean, I did say hello to him. But he's an amazing guy. I spoke to his secretary afterwards, and I said, what's he like to work for? And she said, oh, he's incredible. He's not a workaholic, but he lives for writing. He said, you would have thought somebody like Clive James, I mean, he owns that production company, they make a lot of telly, he's, you know, written wonderful books, he must be loaded, and yet he goes into the office every day and writes from morning till night. He shuts himself in his office.
He enjoys it.
And writes because he loves it, which is great, you know, I think that's brilliant.
One more question and we'll wrap it up for this time, then. Any more questions?
Anyone?
Yeah. Well, how would you feel about working with Tom Baker on Dark Dimensions? Because it was all centred around him.
Yeah, I really would have.
Doctor.
I would have loved to have worked with Tom. I mean, I met Tom for the first time in Baltimore when we were doing not a convention, because it was when he first came back onto the convention circuit again, and he was a bit wary of, because he'd done so many and he'd been associated so much with Doctor Who. So David Blaze, who runs the American fan club, very cleverly called it an event, and he was going over to read Christmas Carol. It was around Christmas time, and he did this sort of one-man reading of Christmas Carol, and I'd never met him before, and I was totally awestruck, you know, by this huge figure. And we had a limo to pick us up at the airport, and you know, I was in my scruffy old jeans. I thought, oh dear, I should have put on some nicer clothes, really. Anyway, he completely ignored me for like 2 days until we did a pledge drive on a local PBS station. And we were sitting in the green room before this started, and I was chatting about various things, and he was talking about journalists. And I said something vaguely witty about, I don't know, Richard Ingram's and Private Eye and stuff. And he looked at me like this. And he obviously just thought to himself, my God, she's got a brain. And he didn't shut up for the next... All during this live transmission of this programme, he was talking to me.
You know,
sort of, yeah. And ever since, we've been firm friends. And I actually did work with him on children's radio series. I did a thing with him and Danny John Jules. It was a poetry series. And the three of us got on... I mean, the three more unlikely people. Can you imagine? You know, Danny John Jules, me, and Tom Baker.
Yeah. Sounds quite bizarre.
And it's like the beginning of a bad joke, isn't it? Yeah. There was a Doctor Who, a cat, and a mad teenager. No, but I actually, I mean, I've seen Tom several times since then, and he's always lovely to me. I mean, he can be an absolute shit, you know. I mean, I know, I've got a friend who's in the music business, and he used to work for a commercial organisation that did voiceovers for adverts and things, and he said, what's Tom Baker like? You know, and I said, I really, really like him, but you know, he can be very difficult. And he said, you're telling me. He said he behaved absolutely abominably, but I think he gets bored a lot of the time, and I think he loves to just play people.
He likes to rile people.
If he can find some little chink in somebody's arm. I mean, we went out for a meal
until he gets the reaction.
Yeah. We went out for a meal in Baltimore, and he was trying to do that with me, and I wasn't taking it. You know, I just was laughing at him and saying, "Oh, you're so, you know, you're so stupid," or "You're so," and I was just being like, I suppose, you know, friendly with him, and I don't think he was used to somebody who just wasn't taken in by him, you know, and he was getting more and more and more outrageous in the
He was
stories
trying to get a
he was
reaction from
telling,
you. Yeah.
in the stories, and all the poor fans who were with
Yeah.
him. I mean, it was David Blaze, and they were sort of cringing like this. And I mean, he was pinching waiters' bottoms. He was doing everything to try and get a reaction out of them. It was so funny. We had a great time.
I think for this part anyway of today, we've come to the end of this. So, Sophie Aldred, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Very good interview.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He's got his
Good
award
job
last
doing
time.
Oh. Yeah,
Yes,
good,
Chris
isn't it?
provided all the notes, background notes. He's our archivist.
Very,
so
very
it's a
well
team
researched.
effort here.
It's great. Really good.
We're going to have some lunch, I
Oh,
think.
goody, must have
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah.
a meat eater or a vegetarian?
I'm a meat eater.
This is important
It's
to
funny
ask
because
this.
I do eat vegetarian. The only sort
We
of,
have both, so-
health thing I'm doing. Oh, that's really good. It's such a lovely idea.
Well, we have vegetarians here, so I'm
It's
going to look
brilliant.
after them.
I'm not now, by
The things I can't eat
You
are
haven't given up already.
I can't eat sugar or yeast or wheat. I mean, not that I'm
So
you
the
know.
cheesecake is out
So
of the question then?
unfortunately, yes.
And
which
Yorkshire
is a real
pudding.
shame. And Yorkshire pudding. Yeah.
Gluten allergy, isn't it? Gluten.
It's
Yeah.
gluten, yeah, and it's it's a thing called candida, which is
Yeah.
very much, you know.
Yeah, I've been there.
Have you?
Yeah.
Been there, done that
Yeah.
one, yeah.
Lovely carrot cookies you can make. You know.
Oh
all
yeah,
these
yeah.
Lovely, delicious.
Oh, I know. I mean, I do, and I really like the food.
Yeah.
Luckily, I mean, I love the food that I can eat. But
Once you research into it, you know.
yeah,
you
there's
can
a
sort
lot
of-
that you can eat. Well,
Yeah.
beans and pulses and
That's right.
rice and
That's
you know,
right.
and I love vegetables and stuff. And I've never
We're
had a
still
sweet
on.
tooth, luckily. So
No, that's right. It's the same. Yeah. I mean, I think you can get over it after a while.
Yeah, you can,
This
yeah.
sort of stage when you